panel of young people in studio of various differing opinions. I'll start with Upenyu, who is 23 years old, still in college. He's a writer, and he believes addiction is a choice. Upenyu, good morning.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. We also have Isha. You might remember Isha was here last week. She is a social worker. She too believes addiction is a choice. Upenyu, good morning. We also have joining the panel a lived experience, Charles. Now, Charles himself is a 26-year-old master's graduate. He studied international relations.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
And in last way, not least, a voice that I'm also pleasantly surprised to have in studio. One whose father's name is no stranger to Detox, Dr. Dewa. His lovely daughter is in the building. She too is studying social work. She too believes addiction is a choice. Good morning. Welcome to Capital.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming in. So we're going to start right in by meeting Charles. Charles has a story to share with us as far as addiction is concerned. Meet Charles on Detox. Charles is a 26-year-old master's grad student, as I said already, who's had struggles with alcohol, cannabis, and tobacco addiction. We'll explore the grim realities of smoking and ask millions that are caught in this deadly grip. Charles, good morning. Thank you so much for being on Capital. You are somebody who's had struggles with different kinds of addiction, smoking, cannabis, tobacco, and alcohol. You're 26 now.
Good morning. Thanks again for having me. I think I started when I was 5, to be exact, or even younger. Started with alcohol. So the environment that I grew up in, it was kind of normal for when adults are drinking, and then kids can come in and join in. I've even seen it happen these days. You see guys out with their kids, and their kids are sipping and drinking alcohol. But as I grew older, and I was in high school, I started experimenting. At one point, we were brewing our own alcohol at school. I went to a boys' school, and from there I went to uni, and with the freedom that comes with uni, and you are predisposed to a huge population of people. I then started to experiment into other substances. Started off with marijuana, and then went to cigarettes, plus nicotine. So the heat of it started to increase when I went to uni.
All right, I'm still stuck at you being 5. And you were already trying alcohol. Talk to us about that. I was what would we do at 5 years old? You're which room to some extent.
So it's a matter of environment. I grew up in a sort of like a peri-urban area, and it was normal, for adults to drink around kids, and you want to just know what's happening, you want to experiment and all that, and then you're allowed to do that. So that's when I really started. It could have been even earlier, but I would say 5. Because I remember some functions that would go to, and then alcohol was there, and then we'd drink,
saka wangosvita musikawa here kana kuti vanhu vakuru vaitozvona kuti akachale kakuita zvako zviya vachitouchirira zvinosa zvatinoita vana chikuzirira mwana paya.
So mune makawanda ka with my cousins, I'm with just a bunch of other guys of Maraing, and then there's a function happening in Christmas, let's say, and in our culture alcohol has to be there. As much as food is needed at any function, alcohol also has to be there. So we are sitting near Madara and all that, and then the cover is going around. So sober, it passes you, but then when they start to get warm, then it's passed on to you.
So this is you at 5. That means by 14 you already, I'm assuming, familiar and accustomed to the taste and the feeling of alcohol?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I even remember some moments when I was drunk and I was a kid, maybe even 10. And then people would actually laugh about it,
Yeah.
And yeah.
So at what point did you as Charles start developing the craving, the taste, the desire to actually buy your own alcohol, to find your own alcohol?
I don't know. I can't really like draw a line to say this is when it became a thing that I craved for. But because for the majority of the time it was just experimentation. Like I was saying with the end and east which koro and then tuturama eu and then no, I can't say the recipe because then kids will follow.
Is that
yeah,
easy?
yeah, and then would actually make our own alcohol. I remember also when I was because I went to a different school when I did my A levels. There was ethanol in the lab, and there was one crazy guy who knew about ethanol before we all knew about it, and then would sneak in to get it. So back then it was the thrill was in the process as well as the consumption. But then after college, like when I went to college now, the responsibilities, the freedom comes also with responsibilities, and I started meeting life, but I couldn't comprehend what was happening really. Talking now in retrospect. Then uni. Then I started consuming more. I can say university. That's when I really started like going out for it and finding my way to make sure that I was always.
And so the cannabis, the cigarettes, when did they get into the mix?
So what happens with alcohol or any substances? It creates a gateway for other substances, right? Like when you're consuming more substances, alcohol and all that, you're in an environment that has other demons that are at your disposal. So with cigarettes, it started off as an experimentation, I would say, and then it's very easy for you to get addicted to nicotine. The cannabis, at one point, I was a constant smoker. And then with time, I would tone down on it. When it was not available, I didn't have much of a problem with it. But with the alcohol, it always had to be there.
So when you look back, what kind of a childhood did you have? Do you feel like you came from a broken home? Do you feel like you were neglected? What sort of, when you look back to your childhood, how would you describe it?
It was a happy childhood. Grew up in a big family. It was beautiful. I think if there's anything that I would, from my background in my childhood, that I would say might have contributed to me taking was just that the environment that I grew up in was allowing. Also, my old man was an alcoholic himself. Something that we never knew when he was alive at that time, that, there's something called alcoholism. We just thought, that kind of thing. And so, I grew up around him. But I don't really know if that contributed, but because I haven't dug deep into that. I think it's a scary place. I wouldn't want to go there.
You're not ready?
I'm not ready at the moment,
Okay.
But to say my upbringing was broken would be a lie. I actually think I was spoiled a lot because I'm the last in a family of 7.
Seven?
Yeah.
Mama kawanda. I put out a
No.
It was just you.
It was just.
Okay. So at what point did you realize that you have a problem?
Okay, so recently actually, I think 2 years back, like I said earlier, it starts off as experimentation. You want to know what's happening, you're curious about what's happening, and then you go into it. But then what happens with alcohol now is it can easily become a habit, substances as well. And it has its own benefits, I would say, in quotes, which when you take cannabis, you feel good. When you take alcohol, you feel good. You cannot run away from that. It has a nice feeling, there's nice euphoria. If you're having problems at the moment, they kind of like vanish. But the only problem is you're only putting a hold to them for that moment, And so, when you're older now and you're facing real life comes with challenges every day that need to be dealt with. Some of them need to be dealt with there and then. Some of them, but you need to work through life. And, when I get in those situations that required me to put extra effort to finding how to deal with my responsibilities, to be accountable and all that, the closest thing that was easier to do for me, substances. So I know which is praise one, but knows only around 2 coats in the apple, and even, in places where I need confidence to go into, sometimes you actually take it saying, this will help me find a solution. But then it's only a problem in the long run.
Yeah.
So with time, I started drinking at times and places that were kind of like inappropriate. Like I said earlier, the majority of my family did not drink. So there was an expectation that I would follow in the footsteps of my siblings, and but I had got to a point where now it started affecting my life. I was working, I was indulging in substances. At one point I was working as a driver, driving a very huge truck, and I would wake up in the morning. The first thing that goes in my mouth was alcohol, and I would just be drunk throughout the week. Like throughout the week. I can actually count. I could actually count the number of hours, days that I was sober at that particular time. And so it started affecting work. It started affecting my relations with my family. It started affecting my relations with people.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is alcohol.
Yeah.
What about the cigarettes? Because for most people, we perceive cigarettes to be harmless. Like there's a low perception of harm when it comes to cigarettes. The chimney, cancer and things like that.
Yeah.
But as a drug, as a source of addiction for many people, for young people, would you agree that there's a low sense of harm that comes with smoking?
Yeah, I think it's because the effects of smoking are long term, rather than the effects of maybe other substances. Because when I don't smoke, it's going to catch up, but later. But then with alcohol, the effects are usually call it immediate, because but then with cigarettes you can smoke and nothing happens. So I think with nicotine and cigarettes, it's the fact that maybe the call it the effects are long term. Same thing with the vapes. Those things I've heard are more dangerous than nicotine.
Yeah.
But then kids continue to consume, knowing even some people who have been affected by those things. So I think the fact that the result or the effects of it are a bit long term makes it easier for people to just go about it.
How many cigarettes were you smoking a day, say?
At one point I was smoking maybe 15, 20.
Packet of Nemanganji?
20.
No, 20. So it's like a pack a day.
It's a pack a day. And it's also expensive. Yeah. Because just think of it, if you are smoking a month, you are working a low income job, and you need $1 every day to buy cigarettes, or even $2, or even $1.50. You take that on top of the cannabis and the alcohol, you top it up there, you're talking maybe someone's salary in a month that is going.
Yeah. Normally they say it's boys versus girls that have actually tried smoking, that have tried alcohol. Upenu, have you tried any of them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alcohol, yes, I've tried alcohol. Yes.
You've tried it or you drink?
I've tried it or I drink.
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Oh yeah, I drink.
You drink.
Exactly.
What would you consider yourself someone who's dependent on alcohol at the moment?
No.
No.
Because I hardly buy alcohol. It's somewhat kind of occasional. Do it like a social lubricant and stuff. I can spend months without.
What do you think happens to the brain of someone who says they are struggling with drinking, with smoking? How do you think this substance is affecting their ability to control their actions?
Like again, the environment, and also struggling with the environment, and also struggling with the unknown of like life and reality and what it is. And sometimes it could be just like a cultural thing, it could be just like a cultural thing, and it gives them the hope of life. Some people are better off following that routine of like wake up in the morning, there's something that speaks to me, and that's the alcohol, that's the drug, that's what is given them. And I think it has always been there through history and now, because even if you look like back in Ice Age days, people would starve themselves when they weren't enough they would starve themselves so that they can have that sense of high. And we can even say, even as kids, when we turn around, but no spin up as kids, there's that sense of you don't have access to unlike Rekas like Charles, you don't have access, but there's that sense of like I need that sense of like it doesn't mean you're going through certain abuse, but there's that sense of like I need that sense of thing. So it has been always there, even if history even there's actually many books that say how we are civilized today as humans ties out to alcohol. In history, they say there's so many like alcohol breweries are there with like starting off our civilizations. As humans, we were in hunters and gatherers, right? But then when we went to agriculture, right, that's when we grew and we stay for that alcohol and we'll stop traveling and we'll create communities and society through what alcohol is. So it's really complex to what humans do and how they find it.
It's Capital 100.4 FM Harare's Abit. Is addiction a choice or a disease? We're asking our young people this morning how they are understanding and process.
So for me, I've done quite a bit of research because I was in rehabilitation since last year, from November to May, if I'm not mistaken, it should be May. So I spent 6 months trying to get a hang of it, which is why I can definitely speak with personal authority that addiction is not a choice. Because willpower alone cannot save you from addiction. I've gone to points where I would want to quit alcohol, I would want to quit smoking, I would want to quit all those things. But then with the willpower that I have, I still find myself in that place again. So then you mentioned something interesting earlier where you said, where you talked about habits. So habits are, like a way of doing things, and these things, they become like hardwired to our brain, right? So drinking substance, it becomes a habit over time. You find with Monano smoker, they have certain periods that they smoke. For me, it was usually before bathing, I'll take a smoke. After eating, I'll take a smoke. Such that if I eat and I don't smoke, it becomes a problem to me. The craving starts coming out because my brain is wired that we have a routine. Even though in the beginning I put myself in that position by being curious and all the things that led to that, over time it becomes a thing that is hardwired to your brain, right? So willpower can tell you that I don't want to drink, and then you really don't want to drink. But because your brain is wired in that way, you're going to find it's going to be easier for you to slip into that, into the cycle again. So the best way is for willpower supported by practical ways of staying sober if you want to avoid these things, which is try to break the cycle of the habit. If you this might be too long, but there's actually a sequence of how a habit starts. Starts off as a cue that is something that pushes you into, and then it becomes a craving, and then you take action, and then you get a reward. So it's that reward that then wants you to do it again.
So at what point, according to you, is the addiction bit of that process you've just described? You said from the habits, then there is the...
Sorry.
You gave a sequence. You said habit,
of the habit.
Craving, I think.
No, it's actually a cue.
Cue.
And then it gets to a craving, and then it gets to action, and then it gets to reward.
Right.
So the reward is the chemical release in the brain.
Right. So where is the addiction in that process, do you think?
Well, addiction comes when the whole process is completed from time to time.
Right.
So it becomes like a frequent thing.
Okay.
You satisfy today, you satisfy tomorrow, and then it becomes like the known way of living.
Okay.
I think it goes two ways, like what Charles said. It starts off as a habit, and while it's still in the habitual stages, it now comes down to you as the individual, whether to break the habit and create a new one, or to continue with the habit until it becomes something you can't stop. So with a classic example is coffee. We've normalized coffee as the morning go-to beverage that gives you that kick in the morning, and you're ready to tackle the Monday morning, and you're excited, and you start off there. So it starts off as the light coffee, re-coffee, which is nice, very, until it grows stronger to Jacobs, to filter coffee, and before you know it, someone is carrying a flask every day of coffee. During the day, they're drinking 10, 11, 12, they're on the coffee.
Just coffee, even umjolo, you know. There are certain people like, I want the phone what's not in a 9, I want phone in a 6. What do you mean? They get paranoid, they become that stuff, and if you do not talk to yourself and you don't speak to yourself and understand that dealing with people, dealing with substances, dealing with life need a sense of like control, need a sense of realization. Yeah.
Upen, I know, Charles, you wanted to answer this question, you still can. But Upen, earlier you were talking about how circumstances as well, the environment that you grew up. Charles gave us a very interesting account there where he was 5, and at 5 you have very little understanding of what self-control is, you have very little understanding of what addiction is. How do life circumstances play into the circle or cycle of addiction? We've also heard that I know we were checking if he had a difficult childhood, he didn't. But I think you might have heard that there's some children or some young people who've had very difficult growing up environments where they are then, using substances either to cope or whatever is going on in their mind. So if we were saying self-control alone is enough, where then does the role of circumstance fit into this whole situation? Classic case of Charles being here.
I wouldn't say self-control alone is enough, but there has to be a certain point where you have to understand you're alone, you're on yourself, and you have to fight it, because the moment the environment, for you to look up for the environment to change is beyond your control. So it's sort of like a fight between things you can control and things that you can't control. So that's the thing. Yeah, self-control alone is not enough, but that's what is there. Those people.
Yeah.
So,
I really want to get into that. I think this conversation is a very crucial conversation that we are having. One thing that I want you guys to take note of is be careful how you classify these things. Because there are people out there who are struggling with substances. At one point, the reason why I went to rehab was it took a lot of convincing from my family. But there's a time when it was suggested and I said, no, I can work it on my own. Because I'd done it before. At one point, I went for like 2 years without drinking. And that was my willpower and self-control working for me. But then that alone does not prepare you for moments when those things that put you in that state hit you again. So I think we cannot take these things apart to say self-control alone. It cannot be enough. There are so many other things that you need to put in place once you find yourself an addict. Things like understanding yourself, self-awareness. Those are things that I was taught when I went to rehabilitation. I didn't even know that there was something like low self-esteem that can push you into doing substances, And there are so many kids nowadays, and it's affecting kids in that they're exposed to a huge, pool of information. They know this person who is doing that, they know this person who is doing that, they know this person who is looking cool and doing cool, but they are not cool, but they want to be that person. So their confidence their self-image is negative from the word go. You feel like you don't belong to the environment of how things are going nowadays. Because people are portraying a certain life. So you get into a state where all those things are, thrown on you. And the reason why I said we need to be careful about this conversation is, if we classify this as a choice, it adds on to the stigma of people who are trying to fight drugs and substances, right? I'm going through stigma right now, where I'm stigmatized for going to rehab. And people tell you, it's associated with so many things. Weakness is one of them. Being a junkie is one of them. So many things are associated with that. But really, I'll tell you from experience, I was fighting this thing. And some of the depression that I went through and the anxiety that I went through, that I later on realized I needed to work on, were actually fueled by the thought that maybe I had a choice in what was happening. Because then I'll choose to do it, right? And then I'll go for it. And I'll go for a certain period. And then because I'm addressing what I'm addressing is not really the problem. The problem was my self-image, like I said earlier. It was my self-confidence. It was all those things that was happening deep. And it was surfacing now as alcohol. Actually, in some cases, it actually becomes a solution to problems. Like people are consuming, they're indulging because they're trying to solve problems. So for you to actually solve the problem of drugs and substance and alcohol abuse, you need to go down to the root, find yourself, find who you are, find the areas that you're lacking, right? And then work on strategies to address that.
Yeah.
So
Do you think, environmental issues we've had, like, for example, when you've had childhood problems, you've had trauma, poverty, we've heard that these things make someone more susceptible, right, to seeking solace in addiction. Do you think, Charles, this reduces personal responsibility of a person over the choices and the decisions they make?
what I think is when you find yourself in any situation, right, you find yourself in a situation where, like you said, you grew up in poverty and all that. If you look at it, you can see that there are people who came from, say, the same environment, same childhood. Maybe they stayed at a home, and they were equally abused. They were equally neglected, right? But then some of them rise to be good people. They rise to do better, to do the opposite of what the circumstances demand of them. But then some people they decline into that role, So I think it just goes with the person as well.
Yeah, it goes with the person, I think so, because it really, how we cope with pain and how we process it is very different to who you are and what you are. And usually the people who rise towards, actually, if you look at it, they are the exception in that environment. You realize that it'll be like that very few person who manage to make it out. Some people will try their best, and when you're not been in their shoes, it's easier for you to say, I took my drugs. But when you've never been in you won't understand.
Here's a question that's coming from a listener. I wish, so they sent us a screenshot of a book that says The Truth About Drugs, and he says, I wish I could distribute this little booklet in schools. Addiction is a choice and peer pressure. Why do people create a harmful habit? Why not just create an exercise habit? And by the way, exercise can actually be an addiction. We've spoken about this as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Addiction or to substances or alcohol is only one form of addiction, but in itself, just because it's exercise, is not making it a better addiction.
Yeah,
exactly.
It is still an addiction.
It's an addiction with so many other negative impacts, but then people don't want to talk about it. You find that there are people who get addicted to working out that they don't have time for their families. They don't have time for social life. They become isolated, like so. And then, in as much as people say those things, they help with depression, they help with all that, they can actually become depressing, I've heard so many guys who have been in it, and they said, well, it went too far. People start taking, muscle enhancers and all that.
Yeah.
So it can actually be a dangerous one. Like I
I
said earlier, if you are indulging in substances because you have low self-esteem, you have this, like as a person, you're low in maturity as to handling yourself, you're not self-aware. Whatever you're going to go into. When I quit alcohol, I started drinking energy drinks and coffee and all that. And then it started becoming an addiction as well. So exchanging one addiction for another is not it's not a good idea.
Yeah.
The best thing that you can do, and I think where alcohol and addiction is a choice is before you get into it. And if you are informed, right? For some of us, we're not informed when we got into it.
Yeah.
We went into it because of all those reasons. But before you go into it, and then you straight up know the facts, once I start, do you know that the World Health Organization used to prescribe a certain amount of alcohol is healthy, but then they've scraped that off to say no amount of alcohol is healthy. Because you start taking it today, it's going to spiral. You're going to get your alcohol tolerance is going to get higher. You're going to have to push to meet that,
Got you.
Yeah.
0719-10404. Do you think addiction should be treated as a disease, or is it more about personal choice and responsibility? Bree, you've been, it could be a condition, it could be a disorder. Do you think now rehab programs, because you're also in social work, should our rehab programs focus on the treatment? I wanted to say, do you think our rehab programs should focus on the disease aspect of it, or focusing on personal responsibility as far as overcoming what your addiction is?
Based on this discussion, I've heard a lot. So I'm beginning to believe that both aspects have to be considered. because we talked about how addiction. I think right now we should just be in a situation to realize that it takes a village to cure addiction. And by village, I don't just mean people. I mean self-awareness to be taught is a village. Because we say that, what did we talk about? We talked about the fact that, were we saying that, you asked about willpower.
Mm-hmm.
What was the
Yeah.
question? When you were saying that, is it only willpower that can cure addiction?
Mm-hmm.
So I think, based on our discussion right now, I'm beginning to believe that it takes a village, and in that village, a lot of factors should be considered, not just the social aspects, but we're also looking at the brain, so that addiction doesn't become, and we don't lead someone to another addiction, but we're just curing addiction, and we're bringing them to be aware of themselves. So rehab centers should not only center on maybe injecting, they should not only center on, let's talk to her, let's include a psychologist, let's just involve everything, so that health-wise I'm fine, and socially I'm able to now live without the addiction, to tell my story, how through involving my village, and my village is everything that will help me overcome addiction.
Yeah. Very interesting thought processes there. And I actually want to check with you, Ishe, picking up from what Ree is talking about. Do you think rehab programs should have the same approach, same treatment to all kinds of drugs? Or do you think the treatment needs to be different depending on what the person is suffering from? So, for example, if I've taken heroin, should the program be different? If I've taken cocaine, should the program be different? If I've been an alcoholic, should the program be different? If I struggle with food addiction, should the program be different?
I think yes, there's need for a variety, because different substances have different effects and different coping mechanisms for the people involved. So, for example, heroin, it's quite a strong drug with very strong effects. So if we were to treat that alone and just pull the plug out, it can have very dire consequences for the person, as opposed to alcohol and coffee. So yes, there's need to integrate different approaches for different people going through different substances.
And only because of time, we're going to have to leave our conversation here. But really, the question we're trying to understand is the combination between addiction be treated as a disease, or is it more about responsibility and personal choice? Remember, if you have any of these C's, you could possibly be struggling with addiction. Do you find yourself having compulsive drug-seeking behavior? You feel you need to get drugs. Do you have habits that are impacting your relationships negatively, your mental health, your work performance? Maybe you crave drugs.